There are feelings our bodies understand long before our minds do. A sudden chill, the prickling of skin, or the sensation we will investigate today. The feeling of heavy air. It's a common enough experience, often dismissed as humidity or a coming storm. But what if it's something else? What if the air itself, the very medium of our survival, becomes a vessel for something alien? This is not a story about a virus or a poison in the traditional sense. It is a chronicle of an atmospheric event, a subtle invasion that begins not with a bang, but with the simple, unnerving feeling that the space around you has gained weight. Our story begins in the isolated, rural town of Havenwood Creek. Reports started subtly. Residents calling the local weather station, complaining of an unusual thickness in the evening air. They described it as breathing through a wet cloth or walking through unseen cobwebs. Meteorologists found no anomalies, no pollutants, no abnormal humidity. From a scientific standpoint, the air was perfectly normal. This discrepancy is the first pillar of atmospheric horror. When your own senses betray scientific data, who do you trust? Your body or the instruments that tell you you're fine? Days after the initial sensory reports, a new, more disturbing pattern emerged. It was a behavioral change documented by the town's small police force. People began to exhibit what was termed atmospheric fixation. They would stop mid-sentence, their gaze lost, and take a single, unnaturally deep breath. Witnesses described the sound as a hollow gasp, as if they were trying to inhale the entire room. Immediately following this deep breath, the individuals would become placid, their expressions vacant. They were physically present, but psychologically absent. This wasn't panic. It was a quiet, unnerving surrender. This is when the first emergency broadcast was issued. It was a crude, hastily assembled message, transmitted over local radio and television, interrupting regular programming with a piercing tone. The message was simple and terrifying. Attention residents. If the air feels heavy, avoid deep breaths. Breathe shallowly, which the human mind instinctively fills with its worst fears. The threat was now official, yet it remained undefined, invisible, and inescapable. A secluded research team, tasked with investigating the phenomenon, proposed a radical hypothesis. They theorized that the heaviness was not a physical property, but a sensory lure. They suggested the presence of a microscopic airborne entity, not biological, but something that operates on a quantum level. This entity didn't infect like a virus. It resonated. It would alter the air's quantum state in a way that was perceptible only to the human nervous system, creating the feeling of weight. The deep breath was not a symptom. It was the activation mechanism. It was the moment of consent, according to the researchers' theory. A shallow breath was insufficient to trigger the full effect. The horror here is the loss of self. The idea that you can be erased while your body continues to walk and breathe. The individuals who had taken the deep breath were now referred to as echoes. They moved with a strange, synchronized purpose. They didn't speak, but they would occasionally stop, turn towards each other, and emit a low, guttural hum. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate deep in the chest. Audio analysis revealed the hum was not random. It was a complex, layered frequency, almost like a form of data transmission. The echoes were not just empty shells. They were nodes in a network, communicating on a channel no one else could understand. They were building something, or perhaps becoming something together. The government's response was swift and brutal. Havenwood Creek was placed under a total and absolute quarantine. A perimeter was established, and no one was allowed in or out. The official story was a chemical spill, but the residents trapped inside knew the truth. The enemy wasn't a chemical. It was the air itself. The quarantine created a perfect, terrifying terrarium, a closed system where the remaining survivors had to consciously fight their own body's most basic instinct, the urge to take a deep, satisfying breath. Every sigh, every yawn became a life or death gamble. For the survivors, the psychological toll was immense. They lived in a state of constant, low-level suffocation. The simple act of breathing became a source of chronic anxiety. This is a form of somatic horror, where the fear is rooted in your own bodily functions. Survivors reported paranoia, believing the heavy air was sentient, that it was actively tempting them, waiting for a moment of weakness. They taped their mouths, practiced shallow breathing techniques, and watched their friends and family. Terrified of the moment, one of them might gasp and become an echo. Inside the quarantine zone, the echoes began to centralize. They moved in unison towards the town's center, gathering in the main square. They stood motionless for hours, their heads tilted towards the sky, humming their resonant frequency. It became clear they were not just a network. They were forming a single collective consciousness, a hive mind. The researchers theorized they were terraforming the atmosphere from within, using their collective resonance to amplify the entity's presence, making the air heavier and the lure more potent. They were turning the entire town into a giant lung. One final, garbled broadcast made it out of Havenwood Creek before all communication ceased. It was from one of the researchers, his voice strained and his breathing shallow. "It's not taking over. It's hatching," he whispered. "The bodies, they're just the shell. The resonance is the signal. It's calling something. Don't look up." The transmission ended with the sound of a single, deep, hollow gasp, followed by a profound silence. The idea that this was merely the first stage of something far worse is the core of cosmic horror. Humanity is not the main character, but merely a catalyst for an event beyond our comprehension. After that final broadcast, Havenwood Creek went silent. The quarantine remains a permanent scar on the map. no surveillance, audio or visual, has ever detected any sign of life since. The echoes, the survivors, the town itself, all gone. But meteorological satellites have detected a strange, localized atmospheric anomaly directly above the town. A pocket of air that does not move, does not mix with the surrounding atmosphere, and absorbs all radar signals. It is a dead spot in the sky, a monument of silence. The story of Havenwood Creek was officially erased, but in the years since, isolated reports have surfaced from all over the globe. A hiker in a remote forest, a sailor on a calm sea, a family in a quiet suburb, all describing the same unmistakable sensation, the feeling of heavy air. It is a quiet warning, a prelude. The phenomenon was not contained, it was seeded, and it waits patiently for you. It waits for a moment of quiet contemplation, a sigh of relief after a long day, or a gasp of surprise. It waits for you to forget the most important rule. If the air feels heavy, don't breathe deeply.